Everyone, my name's Ashley Spetter, and I am going to talk to you about my presentation. The topic for my presentation was suicide prevention in adolescents, and the purpose of my presentation was also one and the same: suicide prevention in adolescents. And I did this presentation at my practicum site, which was Benton Consolidated High School, and I did that practicum with the nurse there, who is a bachelor's degree nurse, Candy Pankey. I chose my topic for suicide among adolescents because it's become a really big concern. You hear about it in the media all the time. Some student has committed suicide for this reason or that reason, and I deal with a lot of adolescents on a daily basis. I work in a pediatric practice, and we see quite a few teenaged kids, boys and girls, so it's kind of a subject that was close to my heart. And I wanted to be able to inform them and learn more about why this is happening, why students are doing this, and then what I can do to arm them with information about prevention and see what they could do about it, see where the best prevention strategies were. I thought that maybe they could make a difference themselves too, which it turned out that they could, according to my research. It turns out that kids are a really important tool in suicide prevention, because most students present signs and symptoms of suicide to their peers and their friends before they ever present it to an adult or somebody else. So it is really important to incorporate that. My audience was a group of about 14 to 18-year-old kids, and it was a occupation information class. It was really, really neat to present to them. There's a lot of interesting information about adolescent suicide that I found in the literature. The first thing that really surprised me was the statistics about adolescent suicide. Since the 50s, suicide rates among teens have tripled, but the rest of the population has stayed pretty stable. So I kind of found that a little bit alarming. And also, something else I found was every 2 hours and 3 minutes, one youth commits suicide. And 50% or more of these teens have suffered from major depression. So that was something that really, really surprised me, that these teens that are suffering from depression aren't getting more help somewhere to try to help this. And that bullying also plays a huge role. Something that really surprised me about bullying is that 160,000 students skip school every day because they get bullied. I think that is absolutely unacceptable. Like, there's got to be something that can be done about this bullying thing, because it seems to me that every time I hear about someone committing suicide on the internet or on the news or whatever, it's because they were bullied at school and on Facebook and email and all this stuff. And that just really, I knew it was a problem, but 160,000 kids every day, it just blew my mind. Other thing that I learned is that, like I said earlier, students can play a huge role in suicide prevention, and this was really what I focused on, and this was the evidence-based intervention that I used for my presentation. I used a lot of information from a program that was developed by the psychology department and psychiatry department at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, called Surviving the Teens. And it was an educational program that they developed to be used in schools to teach students how to recognize signs and symptoms of suicide in their peers, effective communication strategies when communicating with someone, and when contemplating suicide, where to go, who to talk to, what to do about this, who they can go to, resources. It was just a really great thing, and I think it was a great tool to use. Um, Students were presented with statistics too about youth and suicide. They are presented with identifiable behaviors that they can see in their peers and risk factors that they can look for to see if that's someone that they think may need to be talked to, or someone that's exhibiting behaviors that could be something dangerous or could be something more. Things that I taught them that we went over to look for are mood swings, talking about being a burden to other people, being withdrawn and isolated, and they were given effective communication strategies also for students who are displaying suicidal thoughts and tendencies. And then I gave them resources like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and the Cincinnati Children's Hospital website, cincinnatichildrens.org, where I got the Surviving the Teens information from. All that is there, and all the communication strategies, and even down to the sentence, what they could say, like, say this instead of that. And I thought that was a great resource. I also, told them who to go to within the school, the nurse, the counselor, a coach, someone they trusted, and what to do. Don't leave a person who you really think is going to commit suicide. Get somebody immediately. So all these strategies can help prevent, even if they prevent one teen death from suicide. That's awesome, I think. They were also taught how to recognize these behaviors in themselves and some coping mechanisms that they can use personally to kind of cope with their own life, because teens are stressful. The teen years are stressful, and that was one thing this Surviving the Teens thing kind of hit home on, is that it's stressful time. So it's really important to teach them and give them the tools they need. I also used a brochure from the Youth Suicide Prevention Program that was called Watch for Signs, and it had the signs and symptoms and risk factors for suicidal behavior in adolescents, and then on the back it had the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, the 1-800 number right there, and I thought that was really great too. 3 objectives of my presentation was at the end, for them to identify 3 risk factors for suicide, to identify 3 suicidal behaviors that could be exhibited in a friend or peer that could be contemplating suicide, and then to identify 2 resources that they can go to or contact for help for themselves or someone else. So to conclude, I presented on suicide prevention to a group of adolescents, and I focused on the risk factors, suicidal behaviors, and resources for suicidal peers. I used the Surviving the Teens model that was developed by the Cincinnati Children's Hospital for the presentation, and at the end the students were randomly asked to identify the objectives by raising their hand and being called on. And this worked really well, and I was also really glad that I presented to the students. I had initially planned on presenting to some of the teachers and focusing more on that aspect versus focusing on the student aspect. But after I did some research and talked to my preceptor, I thought maybe it would be better to present to the students instead of the teachers. She thought it would be better. I learned that the students, again, play a large role in prevention of suicide in their peers. Because students, like I said earlier, often show these signs and symptoms to their peers before they show it to anyone else. So it's really important that they are geared and armed with the tools to try to prevent suicide. If I did the presentation again, I would maybe have provided some kind of other takeaway material, maybe something that I could have given them or made like a reference handout that was maybe more quick access, maybe something they could keep in their purse or their locker, a magnet or some kind of little laminated like bookmark thing, or something that they could have kept in their wallet, like a card that had the hotline numbers and stuff on it. I think that would be a great resource, because if they really do get in a situation where they have somebody who they're concerned is going to hurt themselves, they might get nervous, and it might be hard to kind of recall all this information. So in hindsight, I think it would have been a good idea to get something that they could have at their hands all the time. I learned a lot about communication with adolescents, which I can use in my practice, and I really enjoyed the practicum and communicating with the students and watching my preceptor. So thank you.